knowledge, trust with one another, right?
There's a couple of things you said there I want to dig into, and I want to go back, where you started off by talking about, we lost community a couple of years ago, as we were locked down, and, depending on where you were, it was worse or better, or, there was more or less. But I think what we can all agree upon is that with the impact of a global pandemic, where we all suddenly were told, do not be around others, whether you were locked down or not, there was a global movement to separate us. And it stayed that, even today, I'm currently traveling, and, when you're traveling, it becomes very apparent, this separation, this need for separation, because suddenly you're packed onto planes and you're in buses, or, in public places. And suddenly you become very aware of, wow, should I be wearing a mask, or should I talk to that person, or can I hug them? And so even though we're moving back towards something called community, and you just described, this beautiful approach, which is it's a gathering of two or more people around a common topic, where there's a container of trust and safety, and where we're creating a common outcome, or a common conversation. But do we know how to be in community anymore? And I think, I bring us back to that, because I wonder, I think we're all still searching a little bit. What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's such a rich question. I love it. Yes, I think what it's done, and I catch myself in this all the time too. It's this like knowing of the good old days when we would just naturally, most, like effortlessly connect with others, right? I remember I used to literally have a potluck in my house every single month for my neighbors, and just to get to know each other, because we didn't do that naturally, or, in life. And then suddenly the pandemic hit. And I'll never forget, about 6 months into the pandemic in Florida, we were allowed to start gathering again a little bit. And so we started to gather, but all of us had that bit of a hesitation. And part of it, I see it to be, we all kind of got through the shock of being in our isolation. And then we continued to, and then because we're out of the shock, it's a habit of isolation. And whenever we build a habit, we, whether it's a bad habit or a good habit, it's a habit. We're used to that. So I remember about 6 months into what the pandemic, most of the world was still in isolation. We were starting to like venture out and trying to be the same as if nothing happened. And all of us had these moments of like, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I actually really enjoy being alone. Or some of us would say, I'm actually, for me, this is what I would say is, as an extrovert, as somebody who really gains energy from being around a lot of people, I also really started to find value in receiving that quiet rest moments that I just didn't give myself prior to the pandemic.
Right.
So I feel like in each of our own lives, in our own worlds, we are still trying to recalibrate. What is our new version of community? What feels really good? I've also seen that it's given us a lot of freedom. For some, those who have said, you know what, I am a different person because of the pandemic, and having experienced those frames of isolation, those moments of isolation, it's now giving us new paradigms to imagine what else is possible. If I were to do things all over again, how would I want to build community in the way that feels really aligned for me? Yeah. So a lot of my clients are actually coming to me at this point that have worked with me years prior and saying that doesn't work anymore. Help me kind of recalibrate to this new version, this deeper meaning of community that I really know is there. I just don't know how to reach it yet, because I'm so used to being the guru in the room. And it feels like there's shifting. Yeah.
And I think, what you're touching on, and just before I go into that next question, I just want to let everyone know, look, if you have questions, drop them into the chat or drop them into the Q&A, and we will definitely address them. We want to make sure that everybody is included in our community here that we're forming right now. So please make sure that you reach out and that you send us your questions. We'll make sure to address them as we go along. As you're saying, yes, like I feel that very much, that we're learning. I think community has taken on a new meaning.
Mm.
And I think from my perspective, at working with so many different communities, it's one of the benefits of my business and the work that I do as a speakers coach, is that I end up, working with people who touch on so many different things, and their communities are really rich and deep. But what I'm seeing, and I think I hear a lot, is, well, community is great, personally, but I don't really need a community professionally. Why would I need a community professionally? Or, my business or within my company, we don't have a community. Like when we look through, because I think we tend to think about community as a personal thing. It's like, it's my friends circle, or maybe it's my book club, or so we have these interest communities. But how does it work in the business world? What is a community when we're at work? What does that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. So I think so. I love it because you're right. It's easy to imagine community when it comes to our personal lives, and a lot of companies, especially especially when I first started, I would get that question a lot. Like, I'm great at building community for my mom, like a mom's group or a book club or whatever, right? Fill in the blank. Like, I love wine. One of the communities I helped design was or give input into is the Red Meat Club in Florida. I mean, there's so many fun opportunities to create community around an interest. And I think, especially because I talk a lot about how I have taken visionaries of companies from just vision, $0 into 6, 7, 8 figures in revenue through communities. And so I get that question, like, what? Like, how does this work?
Yeah. How does it work?
How does it work? The way in which I always like to imagine is, first and foremost, if we see ourselves as just an expert that is wanting to go out and speak, it might not be the model for you. It's not a model for everybody. It is a model for those of us who are looking to create transformation and be in alignment and do life with. Do life with, and what I mean is not necessarily personal life with, but like see the transformation and the growth of a client through a period of time, right? So for companies that are ready to imagine, and those of us who are thought leaders want to imagine doing life with in the business sense or through a transformational process, community is such a perfect fit, because now it takes us out of just having to be the only expert in the conversation to now inviting in people to create and be a part of a conversation in partnership with you and in partnership with others who also have interesting genius in their areas to spark even deeper conversation. So for some of my visionaries, it's that I work with, some of my clients that I work with, it is a perfect, their way of creating more market research for other products, other services, right? And for others, it's their way of really harnessing the power of the transformations that have been created because of their services or products, and members of the community are able to now cheer each other on, see each other come alive, see each other through their struggles, and everybody, because we're all understanding the same language, the same training, or the same, using the same services or products, we can all help each other through the hard spots and then the great times as well. Right. So to me, when we think about community in companies, it's really much more about a business model conversation. Does the community fit the business model? Does the community allow for us to increase the lifetime customer value, to increase the opportunities for our clients and customers to become raving fans, and then have a community for themselves as the raving fans? So for example, I think of the company Yelp. It's a website. Yeah, it's amazing service. They're not one of my clients, but I love what they've done, right? And I've actually studied their model significantly because I love what they've done. They have a super users group, basically the super reviewers, those people who like review everything and put everything on Yelp. When a person reaches a point where they have made so many reviews of so many products and services, they're then invited into this very exclusive community of basically super fans of Yelp, super reviewers of Yelp. Okay. And when they get to that level, then they're invited to additional perks, to give feedback on potential upcoming products that Yelp wants to offer. They get all they get gift cards to all the restaurants in their local area, so that those restaurants are wanting that those individuals' business so that they get some great reviews on Yelp. So they get all these wonderful perks, but it's in service to being able to not only have them claim, hey, I'm a super user, I'm a super fan of Yelp, a super reviewer, I should say, but also now I'm able to go out there and spread the word to other people that I'm one of these amazing people on in this exclusive community, and everybody wins because everyone's getting value from that. So as it
Yeah.
relates, yeah,
What
go
about
ahead.
for Yelp? Like, if you think of Yelp as a company, I mean, there's no way that they would be able to afford to have all of these reviewers, all of these people who are doing the work for them. And
Right.
so, like you said, it's a win-win. Yelp gets helped in terms of its platform gets, I mean, first of all, it gets, rises in the rankings and all the things that we look for when we live in a virtual world. But they're literally having people work for them,
Mm.
because they love them for love,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Because that's what it is. And so, isn't that incredible? Like you can't buy that. You can't pay for that. But
No.
yet the value of it, like if we were to go like, hey, if we're sitting in a boardroom doing the hard economics on it, the value of that is huge.
Exactly right. Well, and then we can look at it, and again, going back to a business model perspective, that's they built their business model in service to their people, right?
Mhm.
And so their people become the community in which that continues, yeah, helps the ball continue to roll. So for those of us here in Thought Leader Academy, who are also wanting to, well, how do I bring community in? I'll give other examples as well of others who are more thought leaders who have made the choice to use community as a part of their model.
Yeah.
So one particular client of mine, her name is Hannah Alonso, and she's actually in Spain, which I know is where you're at right now. And she has the School of Integrative Health. And so she has built an entire model around community. Of course, she could just be the expert on this topic and share from her heart, enroll people into her programs. But what she did instead is create community in multiple ways. She has an internal community for her clients and her students that are part of the school, but she also now has a community before they join the school. And in that community, she creates what I call the small but mighty transformation. She gives them something, a taste test of what it's like to be in community with others who are also interested in really reestablishing their health and all of who they are, by having a small transformation on the front end. And so that we were able to see some incredible results by having that kind of a community, and then lead them into a deeper relationship in a different community experience for only those who are private clients on the back end, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, so and we've been able to track, I'm a big fan of tracking how they work, how these communities work. So in her front end community, the first 6 days of launching, basically, she did 185,000, no, I'm sorry, 125,000 in US dollars in a 6-day launch. And then the following month, we said, let's try that same small but mighty transformation in a 1-day experience instead of 6 days. And let's see if that works. And we did 185,000 in that. So it
And
works. And then
it
she just
worked.
kept rinsing and repeating that same model on the front end to bring new potential community members into her world. And then on the other side of it, launching the deeper, more, where the transformations continue beyond one transformation.
One of our members of the Thought Leader Academy, and I know she's here today, Athena. Athena is creating a movement around in medicine and health on helping people. And so Athena, I don't know if you're busy. I don't know, because I know sometimes people just listen to these things, but would love to know if you've got any questions, because I know when you started, that was one of your biggest questions, was around how do you start that movement?
Yeah.
And yes, I know there's lots of work to be done on your message, and we're working on that. But as you think about what it is you're doing, where are you stuck, or where are some of the places that you'd like to get some input? And you go ahead and drop it into the chat, and don't feel any pressure if you don't want to. But I just thought I'd reach out to you, and as you're thinking about that, Maruxa, as you've been talking, it reminded me also of another client of mine. I worked with Hills Pet Food last year. I did quite a lot of work with Hills. And what was interesting with them, and just as you were talking about sort of community with inside of organizations, I've brought it to mind because I was working with a group inside of Hills that were, the female scientists inside of this pet food brand.
Oh,
And it was about, I mean, Hills is a huge company globally. And so it was a global community inside of Hills, but it was focused on these technical experts. So think about veterinarians or food scientists who lived inside, and they often felt like they didn't have a voice. And so part of what we were doing was I was helping them sort of build their own message and build their own communities inside, and how to actually act as a community. And it was interesting, because even though that wasn't so much about creating profit, what it was creating thought leaders inside the company. And that was a really interesting process. And I could see, each time we got together quarterly, and I would do, we actually took them through a lot of the same work that we do in the Thought Leader Academy. And I remember when we were doing we did a session on surfacing limiting beliefs. And the shift that I saw within that group was quite incredible, because, a lot of them were feeling very, sort of in the background. And when they learned they had a voice, or how to use that voice, and how to actually get at those limiting beliefs, I don't know what the follow on is, because it's been a little while since I've checked back with them. But, as you hear that, like, do you have any examples of where you've seen that kind of transformation happen, and what happens with those companies, where they tend to be more corporate in nature, but community inside does something really big?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, one of my clients is a wonderful company called Kajabi. It
Yeah,
is,
of course, we use Kajabi.
yeah. Oh, you do. Oh, wonderful. So yeah, so Kajabi is, they're a client of mine, and they came to me last year because they said, okay, yes, we have 60,000 paid members, and it's wonderful. And we as a company are at a place where we're ready to, and they basically said, we are obsessed with them, but we also recognize in our growth, we have a lot of us who are new, and we are not as connected um, into its initial, like the initial team that grew this brand, right? And so how do we start, like, really bringing ourselves in? So I think one of the biggest things that is a big, huge, a big gap right now in the corporate space that I've seen over and over again, and it's, Kajabi's not the only one. Like you mentioned, Hills probably has the same experience. It's this experience of, like, we can't be vulnerable. We have to be the expert. We have to have it
Right,
all together. It's all
right,
suit tied, like buttoned up, everything. What our consumers, though, are wanting, and I think this is a really important piece, is that our consumers are wanting more transparency, right? We're expecting, as a consumer, we think about, like, all of us as consumers, we can find out anything about anything, anything about anything. If it's online, we're going to know about it. So what do consumers do today? They will Google the heck or Facebook it or YouTube it or whatever they want to do to find the information to deepen their understanding about what it is that we're talking about. So where I think in the corporate space, and even us who are now in the space of, like, emerging thought leaders, we can actually allow ourselves to shed those old um, beliefs that we have to have everything put together. In fact, Brene Brown does it so beautifully well. Like the more we can be, she's a model, I believe, to
Mm,
all of us in inviting in her vulnerability on stage, right? And when I say on stage, it could be on stage, but also in the writing, in her writing, in
right.
the way in which she's carrying herself on her podcast, in the way in which she's doing every single interview moving forward. It's a courageous act because it's saying that, okay, I recognize I'm going to say some things that are not always put together. But what's so attractive about that is that the people who are on the other side are like, oh my gosh, you're like normal like me. Uh,
Right. You're real. You're real. I mean, I think that's the power of, she talks about vulnerability, and I would add into that also authenticity. I
yeah.
see both, I see Shelley and Athena are weighing in, and Shelley, and I think she brings up a great question is, balancing the balance between privacy and community. Like that is it's a big one, right? So let's talk about that. Let's dig into that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, Shelley, for bringing that in here. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you mean by privacy, if you don't mind sharing it here in the chat.
Yeah,
There's so
I'll
many.
read
Oh,
to you. She just wrote something. My art. So Shelley's an artist,
oh,
a beautiful artist. I actually have one of her pieces.
mm,
My art intercepts people during some really traumatic and hard times. The nature of my can be quite private. The nature of her community can be quite private, but the frescoes are shared, larger, more expansive. There are many different dynamics that I balance. Oh, that's interesting. So Shelley, you actually use art almost as a therapy, it sounds like, for people. So you're creating things around their trauma. And so yeah, that can be difficult. So
wow.
if you want to add anything more, yeah, to kind of bring that to light. And is that helpful, Maruxa?
That's very helpful. I actually have a client, her name is Kyra Peralde, and I'd love for you all to look her up. She does the traveling diary tours, traveling diary. The Sisterhood of the Traveling Diary is where she started. And Shelley, to your point, and I'll just share a little bit of her story because I think it's really powerful and also hits these edges that you're sharing here. She, during the pandemic, she's an engineer by trade, but during the pandemic decided, well, she raises two children and was looking at her window in New Jersey, overlooking New York City, and she's just thinking to herself, oh my gosh, my whole career's on hold, all of our lives are on hold, and how about the woman across the bay, across the Hudson River? How is she feeling? What is she thinking? And then she's like, how about the woman in Kenya or the woman in Peru or in South Africa? What is she doing right now? And she just had this question that just was haunting her. So she decided to create these things called traveling diaries. And she wrote in a composition notebook an entry. And then she said, who wants it next? Next thing you know, she's got a 6-month waiting list of women around the world that want access to writing their story in this diary. The long and the short of it is she has now had at least nine journals, diaries go around the world. She's now preserving them. Smithsonian is in conversation with her for some of this work. And why am I bringing this up? She came with a very similar question. How these stories are sacred to these women. I don't want to bastardize them and try to put them out there into the world and be like, hey, everyone, look at this story. And so, because that's not what the intention was, right? And at this point, she's asking people, are you okay if I share the story? But there were many stories prior to that ask that came through. And so for her, what she actually designed, Shelley, and this is something I think it's really important for all of us to remember and realize, is that no two communities need to look alike ever, ever, right? Give
Mhm.
yourself permission to fully lean into the art and into how the community is meant to be built. The only thing I invite us all into, the only thing that's to me is sacred, is what I call the sacred four. And what that is really the foundation in which we hold space for people, right? So we mentioned already what a community is, a gathering of two or more people around a specific interest, but a community that's rich and luscious and delicious has four elements that really invite us into something deeper. And from that, I invite our creation of community to exist. All right. So the first of those elements is what I call creating a safer space. I used to say create safe spaces, to bring safety in there, but it's safer because we can't ever guarantee safety. One of my clients is a company called the Erotic Blueprints. We built their community to 1 million people after their Netflix show and aired. And we had to really think through that language. Like, how do you hold 1 million people in a community? Oh my word. You can't guarantee safety, but we can create intentionality around safer spaces. So bringing in that energy of safer, how do we build a community infrastructure from a place of safer, right? The next of the sacred four is to feel seen. How many of us, we think about communities that we've been a part of in our own lives, whether it's for business or not, that have made you feel completely alive and aligned with who you are. Likely there's that element of number one, being safer, feeling safer in there. Number two, feeling seen, right? They know you by name, right? And little things, Andrea, like saying, oh, we see Shelly in the chat. We see Athena here. That's amazing. We're calling out members of the community by name. Everybody
Right.
wants to be seen by name. It just feels good and celebrated and seen when they're hurting, right? So inviting those pieces in. And the third one is feeling heard. What does it look like if others in the community have voice? This is really what makes a community. It's that multi-directional conversation, right? So inviting in their voices to be a part of that. And finally, feeling honored and respected. Where there are two or more people, there is diversity. And that means we're always going to have difference of opinion. There's always going to be a reason to be on different sides of something, always an opportunity. And how do we hold space in the honoring and the respecting of the diversity, right? So all of that to be said, those being the foundation, the bedrock, if you will, of building a community, then allows us to design a community experience in a much more intentional, intelligent, and strategic way. And specifically for Kyra, she built it as a Patreon community. So the community is now made up of the women that are the actual writers of the journal entry or the diary entries. It's also made up of patrons who have wanted to maybe they haven't received the diary yet, maybe they're on the waiting list, or maybe they don't need to get it, but they just want to support the power and the mission of seeing women's voices rise in all of their different experiences. So they have an opportunity to now invest money monthly into that. And then it's also made up of her partners now in this media company that is now bringing her in to do a podcast with it. But the way in which she's holding that container in that space is very much, it's an honoring of the women who wrote those diary entries. And so she invites them in around the campfire, if you will, like a virtual campfire every month, and then invites them into almost like open mic about their experience. And it's been this, and then she actually has other journals that are called the Burn the Book. So they're journals, and then they actually, each of them burn the book. Once a journal is filled, it's all the stories we don't want to have anyone know. Those books actually get burned in an actual fire, right?
And I think if I go back to Shelley's question around privacy in community and honoring, what I'm loving about what you're saying is that, well, first of all, no two communities are the same. Every community is going to have its own intentionality. And I think that's really key. And Shelley, as you're thinking about your community and this community of people who you're helping through trauma, and I notice that you say you don't ask to share right now, and maybe asking might be the first step, but also perhaps thinking about how you're creating an intention for your community, and working, to Maruxa's point, don't do that on your own. Go back to the people who are right now sort of in that orbit of a community. Maybe it's not fully a community formed yet, but maybe you've got an orbiting group of people who are thinking that perhaps they might want to be in community, and asking them what do they want, and creating the intentionality around that, and creating that safer container. Because I think there's something really profound about healing and art, and the release, as Maruxa was just talking about the diary, the burning diary, like that. I've done a lot of sort of sacred work around releasing that which holds us back, and often burning is a part of it, because it's a way in which we release things. And I wonder if that isn't something that, as you start to build these communities, that some of the trauma that's being released, certainly not the artwork, but maybe there are pieces of it where you are finding ways for people to release it, but to share it so that it helps each other. And I think, that can be something that is interesting. I think the idea of community is what keeps me from handing over it and sell the selling process to a gallery. Yeah, like, you're creating these beautiful pieces. And it's, I think one thing to consider is that, art is a healing methodology, and the diary is a really interesting aspect of that. Imagine, this diary, I'm getting it, and I can go back and read all of these other stories, and I may not know any of those women. And I may never know any of those women, but I'm reading their stories. And of course, in their story, I hear my story. And in my story, in their story, it heals some of my story. And I have a feeling that your art probably does some of that too. And as it starts to move around the world, and getting out there, and so some of that is just simply you having some intentionality first with you, and then with your community. Would you agree, Maruxa?
I would. And I think, Shelley, it could be just as simple as, and I don't know how simple this would be. I don't know your who you've been working with, but if there were ways in which you could ask them, even previous uh, individuals that you've worked with to create this art, ask them, would you be open for me to share, maybe, hide who you are, unless you're open to me saying your name, but, hide a little bit about the personal details, but share a bit of the story that got us to this piece. Because one of the most powerful things, I worked with another artist actually in Austin, Texas, Javier Cantu, and he and I were actually designing an experience where his art would speak, and he would actually share. He had QR codes on each at the bottom of each piece, in order for them for him to be able to share it and articulate the expression of this art. And we saw an increase in sales because people now are connected to the story. So you're like building a multiple community experience with your art. You've got the people that you've designed the art around and been influenced by to create the art. And then also you have now a community of in essence, an audience that wants to lean in further into community by hearing the story of the art experience itself. And then to ask them to share in writing, it could be as simple as an email saying, yes, I agree to it. It could be you having a conversation, picking up the phone call and saying, hey, this piece of art that we created, I really am, wanting your permission to be able to share this in a unique way, and here's some ideas in how. And just even doing something like that, asking permission, creates a safer, I would assume, a safer experience for you, and also for the person feeling like, oh, I'm re-engaging back in with Shelley into this. This is great. Thank you so much for asking. Everyone feels good when they're asked.
I do. And again, that's that being heard, right? It's being seen and being heard.
That's it. That's right. Exactly right.
And I see Athena has jumped in. Athena says she struggles with getting engagement and discussion going. Everyone's so busy and distracted by other things. How do I get everyone excited about making this movement happen? And Athena, I'd love if you could just give us just maybe a couple of lines on, so the Maruxa gets a better understanding, and I don't want to not get it right. So I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit more about the movement that you're wanting to make, because I know you have a big mission.
Yes,
but
I'd love to hear another piece to that too, Athena, so I can answer you more more specifically, is where are you in the movement making process? Is it right at the beginning? Do you have an audience already, and how large is your audience? That helps me because I can help break down what that would look like based on where you're at right now.
And, just as we're waiting for Athena to drop it into the chat, we can talk about engagement, because I think that is one of the biggest challenges, and so many people have. It's true, that we're all busy. And, when we are in community, a big part of community is being communicative, but is it about always being on? Is it about always being available? Let's talk about a little bit about the engagement within a community and how important that is, and how do you get it?
I love that. Great. So I think we're going to go back before we go right into community and engagement. You want to kind of take one step back, and we're going to begin to think about what is the intention for which we're building community. What is the intention for which we're building community? Every community, a lot of folks, and it's what I call the pyramid that's built on two sticks. Most of us have heard about Facebook groups as a way to build community. In fact, I've created a course on how to use Facebook groups to build community. Andrea, you were part of that program, when we designed it like 2 years ago, right? So there's nothing wrong with building, with hitting create group and getting started. But what happens is we build this pyramid built on two sticks. And what I mean by that is stick number one often is, this is our vision. This is what we stand for. And then the stick number two is, this is our voice, right? Sorry, this is our vision. This is our vision. This is our big vision. This is why we want to gather our people. And then number two is our voice. This is what we stand for. This is what we're about. And when we build a community from just those two sticks, what often happens, well, you build anything on just two sticks, it falls over. It falls over, right? So so
except for us humans, we're on two sticks, but
yeah.
we're not always that balanced.
We've got little feet to keep us steady. We got little toes. And so even so, we still have a foundation that's a little bit more solid because of that, right? So when we're designing community, we want to really begin to think in like much more than what about 98% of people that come to me are doing. We want to start taking a step back and what I call slow down to grow fast. When we slow down enough to really think intentionally about the design of the community and why do we want engagement? What does the engagement do for the brand? What is the engagement of a community? Why does the community need to exist in the first place? Then we can design engagement much more intentionally and strategically, right? So that's the first piece of that. The other piece I want to say is engagement. So if we're just trying to create a Facebook group or a Mighty Networks community circle, it doesn't matter what the platform is, but we're just going to be thinking that we put content out there and we hope that they engage. Those days that's very much 2013, 2014. Like that's 10 years ago. And I'm sorry to say that, because those were the good old days. You could just do that. Today, though, what we really are wanting to look at and what we want to spend energy on is how do we really align into the heartbeats in the room? When we think about our people in our community as heartbeats, what happens?
It changes everything, right? Suddenly they're not just digital, impulses, fingers on keys. Suddenly they're humans. They're absolutely humans.
They're human. And they have loves, and they have curiosities, and they have pain, and they have things that they're curious about, that they're wanting to discover in the world, and things they want to be courageous about, but they're kind of like nervous about it. I don't know if I can actually do the thing. They have the same things that each of us are going through. We're going through all of that in different parts of the world, in different bodies, but same level of desire for expansion, desire for what else is possible. And so when we remember that there are heartbeats first, we can treat them in a different way than just putting out content and hoping that they engage.
So I'm going to read you Athena's overview of her community. So I'm creating a network of healthcare workers to discuss challenges in our healthcare system, share ideas and solutions and resources so we can have support to create projects and bring in donors and change the system from within. The vision is to transform the system to one that is community-centered, accessible, and equitable. I've created a platform on Circle, and so far have 3 members that seem to be excited about the group. I had a larger group on Facebook, but no one was engaging.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, Athena. I really appreciate that. So the one thing I'd want to encourage is, again, to go in and really look at like what is the experience. Oh, so I didn't share this. So when we are building, I was like, wait, did I share this? No, I didn't share this. Actually, I think it'd probably be easier to share with a mod. Can I share my screen real quick?
You go ahead.
Let's see if I
You should
can.
be able to.
Yeah. Okay. Give me a second here. I'm just going to share this slide because I think it will help us all. Oh wait, no, I lost you. Give me a minute here.
Oh, the joy of Zoom.
Right.
Look, it's amazing that we get to talk to each other, you know, from different parts of the world, but you know, it doesn't make it not challenging sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to share this because I think it's really important to look at the different levels and where engagement really falls through and falls in, and how to really engage even more intentionally. So I mentioned the pyramid built on 2 sticks, right? So this is the vision stick and the voice stick. So you imagine that those 2 things are now hitting the build and then activation of a community, right? This is create group on Facebook or on Circle, you know, starting to design it and then activating. So what I encourage us to do, and Athena really spent time on here, is to bring in these 3 more intentionally, right? The vision, values, voice. Allow those things, there's a lot I can talk about there, but really start to bring those into what I call the experiential value. This is where we're now designing the experience within the community itself to create more engagement, right? So as I mentioned, for example, and I don't know how your current content is being run or how it's being presented, and also how you're inviting people into this engagement of the discussions. But there could be a few different things that we can do to really develop and enhance the experience. If right now the experience is where you're putting out content in there and expecting people to just jump in and talk about it, as you mentioned earlier, people are super busy, right? So it's going to be much harder for people to want to jump in, especially when it's on a platform that they're not as used to. So Circle is a phenomenal platform. I love Circle. I love it. We use it quite a bit. We use Kajabi, we use Mighty Networks a lot, and for different clients. And it's a great platform. The problem is because not as many people are as used to utilizing something like Circle, then what happens is they don't come there as often unless there's a reason for us to train them behaviorally to come there every so often. So a couple of things that you want to think through is cadence, right? So how often are you inviting people back into the community? Is the conversation at a place where it's engaging enough? Is it entertaining? There's engaging, there's entertaining, and there's educating, right? So we want to really look at how our content is doing a mixture of entertaining, because that's a lot of times what people want to just escape. We want to escape into another world on something that feels really yummy and delicious to us, right? Something that's important to us. And so as we begin to think about that, like what are some ways to really engage them into laughter, or ways to entertain them with not memes like for every day. It's, that's not what I'm trying to say, but like entertain them with like new thoughts or new ways of looking at things, or bringing guests that would be of much relevance to them and really draw them back in, right? Those are opportunities there. Or maybe it's focus groups. Maybe it's opportunities for people who are in a specific sector to have conversations with each other on a regular basis. So you're now starting to invite in and really make especially at the beginning, individualized, personalized asks of people to be a part of the conversation. Lead the conversation with giving them something to do, especially at the beginning, right? So let's say you have an entire sector in the pediatric space, right? Maybe you can bring all of those amazing humans together into a focused conversation and say, hey, Jennifer, I know you're a pediatric surgeon. Hey, Michael, you're a pediatric oncologist, all these things. And then you give them, you almost like spoon feed the first people that are coming in to really help nourish the conversations that are going to be happening in these beautifully, what's that word? Gosh, I'm
Curated.
totally curated experiences, so that people are like, oh, this was cool. They now feel seen because you've called them into from their area of expertise. You've invited them to see how you think about them specifically and why they matter in the room, in the conversation. And now all this beautiful work that you're doing to really nurture these relationships are going to be coming into fruition. The more you do that and spend time in these early stages of the development of your community, it's going to feed you tenfold later. I can promise you, I can guarantee that. Because
I want to
as,
jump
huh?
I just want to jump in and kind of highlight a couple of things that you've just said, because I want to make sure, because you're such an expert, you know this so well. I want to make sure that we're not missing some of them. So the first thing that I heard was consistency. We need to create some consistency in the way in which we communicate with that, with our community, the way in which we are going at them, so what is the cadence, but also what are the expectations that we've set up. The second thing is, and I think this one is so underrated, is persistence. I think, as humans, we're so many of us, it's like, I just want it to happen now. And, so we create a community, we get some people in it and it's great. And we get no engagement, or we get some engagement, but it's not what we want. And I think there's something really important about continuing. Just it's the persistence. Don't stop just because you didn't get people showing up this week. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over and expect a different result, but be persistent in doing things so that you get people to show up, creating value, and I loved what you said. It was like, we need to engage them, or we need to entertain them, we need to educate them. And I think there was a third, and I can't remember what it was.
Engage
Yeah, it
them.
was engaged. But and so that, how are we communicating with them? How are we engaging with them in such a way that there's value there? Because so sometimes education is value, but so is entertainment. We all live busy lives, if you follow me on LinkedIn, every day I post some sort of a viral video. Why? Because I want to give people a 30-second break in their day, but also because I want them to think about my content through the lens of whatever that video has. And so that entertainment is such a key part of the way in which I engage with my 90,000 followers, which is essentially an audience, not a community. Right. And so I'm communicating with them differently because they are an audience, but some of them are coming into my community, and that's part of it. And then the final thing, actually two more things. One was connect with them, connect individually, create those connections. And especially as the community is growing, we have the ability to connect with people in a more one-on-one fashion. Yeah. And then the final thing that I love that you said, and I think this is so powerful, is elevate them up. We can go inside of our community and elevate a couple of our community members into the experts who are now sharing back to that community. I think one of the challenges that we have as community creators is we think we're the only one that does it, when in fact, when we elevate each other, when we go in and go, hey, I'm not the pediatric expert, you are. Tell me what you think about that. And suddenly that person becomes the expert within the community. And then others want that too. And they want those opportunities. So I thought those, just sort of pulling those out and kind of putting a finer point on them. So sorry, I interrupted you. So I'll let you continue on.
I appreciate it. I think you got it. You absolutely got it. I think and I hope we see the difference here, right? Whereas back, what community building online 1.0 was, let's put content out there. Let's see how many people engage. Let's just reply back and comment back. We're at this next level now, and it's really utilizing the ability of those heartbeats in the room to grow something way more significant than if it
Yeah.
was us as the guru or expert just being like, this is my show and I'm going to bring. It's literally, let's get back to this place of authentically. It's just like it was what we would do if we were in person, right?
Yeah.
Probably like if we were at a house party together or dinner party, if only one person was speaking the whole time, oh my word, you know.
Well, and what a relief too, right? What a relief that you don't have to always be the smartest one in the room. You know,
Exactly.
I really think, I remember years ago as I was learning how to be a facilitator, and I remember that, sort of like you're always afraid as a facilitator of like, what if they ask me something I don't know?
Yeah.
And the answer is you tell them you don't know,
Yeah.
and then ask them what they think, and it's powerful when you do that, because in the world of Brené Brown, you've admitted a vulnerability, and that's powerful.
Mm.
And the second thing is you've elevated them and you've said, let's have a conversation here. And to your point, like, we do that in person. Like I have no issue, saying I actually don't know. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that. And but in community, suddenly we take on this guru role of like, oh my God, I need to know everything. You don't.
We
In
don't.
fact, it's better when you don't. And that's the whole point of community. Many years ago, I remember, sort of studying different business models, and community is a circular business model, right? And where the leader actually moves through depending on the needs of the community. And so
Yeah.
when we think about it in that way, it really, while my job as the community creator is to be responsible to the community, to create the container, to create the safer space, to do all of those things, it's not my job to have all the answers.
Mm-mm. No, in fact, like you said, it really is the gift. The more we don't know, the more we get to lean into each other. And we actually, one of the things I've personally learned recently, so I run my own mastermind. It's called the Revolutionaries. And it's some of the best. I mean,
One day
it's
I'm going to be part of it. I
you
promise.
are so going to
Promise.
be part of it. You are a revolution. I mean, you're already in, Um, and so, but one of the things that I've actually been called out on from my community was this exact thing. You guys, I do it still, like I'm gathering all these community minded folks and we have this thing called hot seats. And once a month, everyone goes into small cohorts and like of 3 to 4 people, and they get some incredible value because I partner them with others who could be of service to them in that moment. And in that, I'm always in like, I'm never partnered in with anybody. I'm in like the main room, like in my main Zoom area by myself, like just waiting for everybody to finish. And they called me out. They were like, hey, you're in this community too. We want you. We want to see you in the room. You are human too. And I was like, oh my gosh, I was doing the exact thing that I'm always encouraging all my clients to not do. And it was because I realized I was afraid to be honest,
Yeah.
right? I was afraid to go deep
Show
in my
your
care.
vulnerability, right?
Yeah,
Because you're the leader. And it's
right.
like leaders don't have vulnerabilities, but of course we do.
I
Of
totally
course we
do.
do. And the thing is, I mean, I know you, so I know that you're not afraid to show them, but there's, we still have these veneers that we forget to take off, and when we go into different places.
Yeah.
One thing I just want to actually highlight, and I think this is something, and we're going a little bit over time, but I'll just kind of finish on this, that you've brought up that I don't want to lose, and that is the power of curation. And I
Mm.
think it's so powerful in communities, as it doesn't matter if your community is, 5 people or 5,000 people, the curation aspect of it is really key. And that is where you're putting people together intentionally. So, when you've got 5 people, maybe you have 2 groups and you've curated who are in those groups so they can have those hot seats, those conversations, because that's important. If you got 5,000 people, it might be, there are still ways to do it so that
Right.
you're creating meaningful experiences.
Right.
'Cause that's what community does. It's
Yes.
not just getting together for the sake of being together. It's getting together for the sake of creating meaning, and
Yeah.
meaning on a topic that you all feel some passion towards. And, for Shelley, trauma, healing through art, healing trauma through art. Like, what an incredible, powerful community that you're creating. And Athena, I mean, changing the healthcare system from the inside out. Wow, that's amazing. And the curation of the people that you would have to be able to have them help each other in ways that you can't even imagine. You put them into groups and magic happens. That's the thing. So I love that, that you talked about that within your mastermind group, that's one of the things you do. You curate who you put in those rooms. So
Absolutely.
tell me more about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, absolutely. I think curation is everything, because so the role of the visionary of the community I often see is to create a space in which an outcome can exist, right? So in the case right now of Athena, right, the intention, the creation of her community, she's wanting to create a network of healthcare workers to discuss challenges in our healthcare system, to share ideas and solutions and resources so we can have support, to create projects and bring in donors and change the system from within. That's incredible, right? So if that is the intention, then curating the right people to be in that space is everything, right? Do you have somebody that is like, no, the healthcare system is amazing, it's perfect. You start getting sponsors from companies that are wanting to keep the system status quo. We know, I mean, that's like the most obvious example that's not going to serve. But when we then really then create intentionality, we know that that's not the right way to do it, obviously, right? But and oftentimes we just say we don't want that, so that's what we don't want, instead of saying we don't want that, and what we do want is.
Yes.
That's where the curation gift comes in. That's the gift of the curation. Now you're inviting the right voices into the conversation. It's also really important. I'm actually working on a project right now. I've been back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Do I want to take this project on? Do I not? Do I want to take it? And the reason for it is because I want to know that the players are aligned with my values, right? So it's really critical. I showed you that the transformed community paradigm values are at the same exact level as your vision and your voice, and we forget about it
Right.
because I want to make sure that when I'm curating a room, an experience, I want to make sure that we are so values aligned that even though we come from different modalities or industries, in my case, we can, because of our values, that's always our common ground,
It
right?
has to be.
It's
It has to be. That is,
critical. It is critical.
I'm here in Spain this week because I've been filming a course, and I did one whole module was on exactly that. It was aligning on our values. We have to align on our values. And if we're not as humans coming together in community, coming together, even as ourselves, just knowing what our values are. And I think, that's, to me, it's even taking that step back. And for those listening, for our audience listening, if you have not done your core values, if you don't know what they are, do them. There's so many resources online. You can find them. We've got a whole segment on this in the Thought Leader Academy when we were talking about your personal brand. Do your personal values, understand what they are, because if you don't know what they are, everybody else is going to tell you what they are, and you do not want that. So, because to your point, it is foundational to everything you do from that point forward. If you're building a community, know your values so that you can build on top of them and not have them told to you. So I think so profound, Maruxa.
Well, and I'm going to reiterate, we often in life in general, think about how often we say things like, oh, I definitely don't want that, or like, I don't want more of that in life. We never invite it. We typically don't, unless we're more conscious about it. We don't ask for what we do want.
Oh
So
God.
knowing how, right? So knowing these values and our vision and who we want to stay, who we are and what we stand for, allows us, it's like the three-way pathway to, or the three strands to the cord, basically, of giving us permission to only create the community that we want. If it doesn't fit and align with that, then it's a no. And if it does, then that's the pathway in which we get to design an experience that feels so alive to us and the beingness of who we are as leaders. So I really encourage that. I really encourage us to take the time to slow, again, this is where I say slow down to grow fast. It
Yeah.
literally is the most important piece of the process, is to understand our values. Because the one wrong, one's, seed that's not meant to be in the room can completely change the dynamic of an experience.
So, so incredibly important. Maruxa, thank you. Thank you for spending extra time. This has been such an amazing conversation. I know that all of our guests here today have learned a lot from you. And I know you've got a session coming up. I think, is it next week or the week after? I never,
Yeah,
I
I
checked
think
with
it's in
these.
the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to come in and do a session with our team at the Thought Leader Academy, doing a group coaching session. So for those of you who are part of the Thought Leader Academy, you've got a real treat with Maruxa. She's going to spend 90 minutes working with you on your community. Oh, it's July 6th. So it's just in a couple of weeks. And so if you're not a member of the Thought Leader Academy, make sure to check out my profile on LinkedIn or check out the Talk Boutique homepage. There's lots of details there on how to become a member. Maruxa, thank you for your time. I so appreciate you, and I so appreciate being in your community. It has been an absolute pleasure.
It is such a pleasure to be here. And thank you for everyone that took the time to listen in. And I hope this was valuable to you.
Yeah. Thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your day.